Eleanor Whitmore had learned, over 72 years of living, that silence was often mistaken for weakness. She stood most mornings at the edge of her property in Napa Valley, watching fog roll gently over the vineyard hills like a slow, patient animal. The land had once been her husband's pride, Thomas Whitmore's dream carved into soil and sun. When he was alive, he used to say the vines listened better if you spoke to them softly. Thomas had been gone for 7 years now. People in town still called Eleanor the widow, as if that word explained everything about her life. They assumed grief had hollowed her out, that age had dulled her mind. Even her children believed it. Especially her children. The house, an old, sun-washed estate tucked between boutique wineries, was paid off decades ago. The savings Thomas left behind, combined with Eleanor's careful budgeting, should have lasted her comfortably until the end of her life. And yet, as she poured herself coffee each morning, she wondered how her accounts seemed to shrink faster with every passing month. Not that she complained. Eleanor had learned long ago that complaining invited attention, and attention invited manipulation. Her daughter, Veronica, called daily. "Mom, did you approve the transfer?" Veronica asked one Tuesday, her voice smooth and rehearsed, like someone reading from a business proposal. "Yes, dear," Eleanor replied gently. "If you think it's best." Her son, Mark, visited every other weekend, usually arriving in a luxury SUV he claimed was leased for business branding. "We're building something big, Mom," he told her as he poured himself a glass of imported wine from her cabinet. "A luxury vineyard experience. Destination tourism. The future." Eleanor smiled and nodded, the way she always did. She let them manage her bank account. She let them speak over her at dinner. She let them treat her home like a resource instead of a refuge. What they didn't notice, what they never thought to look for, was the far corner of her land, where the soil grew darker and the vines twisted older than the rest. Where Eleanor had quietly begun again. Veronica and Mark called their idea Golden Crust Experiences. It was, in their words, a luxury wine country lifestyle brand. Private vineyard tours, curated tastings, influencer retreats, and week-long vacation packages for wealthy clients from Los Angeles and Silicon Valley. They had no vineyard of their own. They had Eleanor. "Well, technically," Veronica said during one family meeting, "this property is under Mom's name, but since we're handling the finances, it's basically a shared asset." Eleanor sat at the dining table, hands folded neatly in her lap. "Of course," she said softly. Mark grinned. "We just need a little more capital to launch properly." A little more capital meant another withdrawal. Another temporary loan. Another reassurance that it would all pay off soon. Eleanor signed the papers. She always did. Inside, however, she kept careful count. She remembered the nights she and Thomas skipped vacations to pay for college tuition. She remembered selling her jewelry to help Mark start his first failed business. She remembered Veronica moving back home after a divorce and staying for nearly 3 years rent-free. Sacrifice had been her native language. But something had changed. One evening, while reviewing printed statements alone, Eleanor noticed a transfer labeled Founder's Retreat, Tuscany. The amount was staggering. Her hands trembled, not from fear, but from clarity. They weren't just careless. They were confident she would never fight back. Behind the main vineyard, which had long ago been leased to a regional distributor, lay a neglected half-acre Thomas once used for experiments. "This soil's stubborn," he used to say. "But if it gives generously." After his death, Eleanor kept the plot untouched. No one paid it much attention. It wasn't profitable, and it didn't fit the neat rows tourists liked to photograph. Perfect. 2 years ago, Eleanor began quietly tending it again. She ordered cuttings through a retired viticulturist friend in Sonoma, rare varietals with unusual genetic profiles, grapes that thrived under stress. Grapes boutique winemakers whispered about but rarely found. She worked at dawn and dusk, wearing gloves and old hats, looking every bit like a lonely old woman passing time. No one asked questions. No one suspected that Eleanor Whitmore was cultivating something extraordinary. The more Veronica and Mark took, the more Eleanor appeared to retreat. She let Veronica correct her in public. She let Mark explain basic concepts to her as if she were a child. She even pretended confusion when asked about expenses. "Oh, I don't really understand numbers anymore," she said once, smiling apologetically. Mark laughed. "That's why you've got us, Mom." Behind closed doors, Eleanor kept meticulous notes. Dates. Amounts. Excuses. And then she made one phone call. The buyer arrived without fanfare. No luxury car. No entourage. Just a middle-aged woman with sun-leathered skin and sharp eyes who introduced herself as Clara Reyes, owner of a boutique winery specializing in ultra-limited releases. Clara tasted the grapes silently. Then she tasted them again. "These," she said finally, "are rare." Eleanor nodded. They've been waiting for the right moment. Clara made an offer that exceeded Eleanor's expectations by 6 figures. Eleanor didn't hesitate. When the harvest came in, Eleanor worked alongside hired hands she paid in cash. The grapes were picked at peak ripeness, packed carefully, transported discreetly. No social media posts. No announcements. No family meetings. The money landed in a new account, one only Eleanor controlled. For the first time in years, she slept without anxiety. 2 weeks later, elegant invitations were delivered around Napa Valley. A private harvest dinner. Hosted by Eleanor Whitmore. Limited attendance. Veronica and Mark did not receive one. They only found out when a mutual acquaintance congratulated them. "Oh," the woman said lightly, "your mother's dinner, everyone's talking about it." That night, Eleanor stood at the head of her table, crystal glasses glowing, laughter filling the air. She raised her glass. "To patience," she said. "And to knowing when to stop being quiet." Veronica called first. Her voice was tight, controlled, the way it only got when she felt embarrassed in front of people who mattered. "Mom," she said, skipping any greeting, "why didn't we hear about this dinner?" Eleanor was seated in the sunroom, a ledger open on her lap. She turned a page slowly before answering. "What dinner, dear?" "The one everyone's posting about," Veronica snapped. "The private harvest event. People think you're partnering with someone." "Oh," Eleanor said softly. "That one." There was a pause. "Well?" Veronica pressed. "You could have at least told us. I didn't think it concerned you." Silence followed, thick, offended, dangerous. Before Veronica could respond, Eleanor ended the call. She placed the phone face down. For the first time, she did not feel the need to explain herself. Mark arrived unannounced the following afternoon. He didn't knock. He never did anymore. "Mom, we need to talk," he said, pacing the kitchen like a man used to command rooms. Eleanor poured tea. "I'm listening." "You sold grapes. High-end grapes." His jaw clenched. "People are saying boutique-level pricing." "Yes." "You didn't run it by us?" "No." Mark laughed, but it was humorless. "You don't understand how bad that looks. We're building Golden Crest. Investors want consistency. Control." Eleanor handed him a cup. "You mean your investors? They're expecting transparency." "So am I." That stopped him. She opened the ledger and slid it across the table. Mark glanced at it, then frowned. "What's this?" "My accounting. Pages of transfers. Dates. Notes. Tuscany. Aspen. Brand consultants. Luxury rentals." Mark's face shifted from confusion to irritation. "This is business expense." "No," Eleanor said evenly. "This is indulgence. Funded by my retirement." Mark pushed the ledger back. "Mom, you're overreacting." Eleanor smiled. "Mark," she said gently, "you've underestimated me for years. I don't blame you. I taught you to. 2 days later, Eleanor sat in a quiet Napa office with Harold Finch, an estate attorney recommended by Clara Reyes. Harold adjusted his glasses as he reviewed the documents. They have power of convenience, not ownership, he said. You can revoke it at any time. Eleanor nodded. I'd like to. And the funds they've transferred? Documented misuse. Harold leaned back slowly. Mrs. Whitmore, you're in a very strong position. For the first time since Thomas died, Eleanor felt something close to exhilaration. The cracks appeared quickly. Veronica's emails grew frantic. Mark's tone turned sharp, then pleading. Their investors asked questions. The money slowed. And then stopped. When Eleanor officially revoked their financial access, the reaction was immediate. They came together this time. United. Angry. They sat across from her in the living room, her children, grown and polished, dressed in expensive clothes she had unknowingly paid for. This is cruel, Veronica said. After everything we've done for you. Eleanor folded her hands. What have you done, Veronica? Silence. Mark spoke. We protected you. From what? From making mistakes. Eleanor stood. She walked to the fireplace and removed a framed photograph, Thomas, younger, dirt on his hands, smiling beside vines. I made mistakes, Eleanor said quietly. I trusted you with my vulnerability. Veronica scoffed. This is about money? No, Eleanor replied. This is about respect. She turned to face them fully now. I gave you support when you needed it. You took advantage when you thought I wouldn't notice. Mark shook his head. You're destroying our future. Eleanor met his gaze steadily. No, she said. I'm reclaiming mine. News traveled fast in Napa. People talked about Eleanor Whitmore with new language. Sharp. Savvy. Unexpected. Boutique wineries reached out. Local businesses invited her to tastings, panels, dinners. She accepted selectively. She dressed better now, not extravagantly, but deliberately. Confidence suited her. Clara Reyes returned with another offer, this time a partnership. Limited releases. Her name on the bottle. Whitmore Reserve. Eleanor signed. The first label featured a subtle illustration of twisted vines. Underneath, in elegant script, patience ages well. Weeks passed. Then months. Veronica stopped calling. Mark sent one message, long, defensive, full of accusations. Eleanor did not respond. She had said all she needed to say. Eleanor traveled for the first time in decades, not because someone else wanted her to, but because she wanted to. She stayed in Santa Barbara. She bought art. She learned to savor things slowly. At dinners, people asked her story. She smiled and told them only what mattered. Another private dinner. This one quieter. More intimate. Clara sat beside her. You surprised everyone, Clara said. Eleanor lifted her glass. I surprised myself. They toasted. Late one evening, Eleanor returned to the forgotten plot. She knelt, fingers in soil. Thomas would have been proud. Not because of the money, but because she had finally chosen herself. She wrote one letter. Short. Clear. I love you. But love does not require surrender. When you're ready to meet me as an equal, you know where to find me. She sealed it. She did not wait for an answer. Eleanor stood again at the edge of her land as fog rolled in. The vines listened. She spoke softly. And for the first time in years, she was not unheard. The first bottles of Whitmore Reserve arrived on a cool October morning. Eleanor stood in her kitchen as the delivery driver carefully placed the wooden crate on the counter. She didn't open it right away. She made coffee first, the way she always had, slow, deliberate, no one rushing her. When she finally lifted the lid, she felt something tighten in her chest. The bottles were elegant. Restrained. The label bore her name, not loudly, but confidently. Beneath it, the words, "Patience ages well." Eleanor ran her fingers over the glass. For years, her life had been invisible labor, meals cooked, sacrifices made, finances stretched thin so others could dream. This bottle was proof that waiting, when paired with wisdom, could become power. She poured herself a small glass. The wine was complex, layered, unapologetic. So was she. The Napa Valley Chronicle published a feature 2 weeks later. The quiet power behind Whitmore Reserve. The article didn't call Eleanor a victim. It didn't frame her as a sentimental widow. It described her as a strategic landowner who had recognized the potential of forgotten soil. People stopped her in town. "You're the Whitmore woman," they said, with admiration. Eleanor smiled politely. She didn't correct them. Desperation changes people. Mark showed up first this time, alone. He looked thinner. His confidence, once so polished, had dulled. "We need to talk," he said, standing on the porch. Eleanor considered turning him away. Instead, she stepped aside. They sat in silence for a moment. "I made mistakes," Mark said finally. "We both did." Eleanor waited. "We want to rebuild," he continued. "We can merge brands. Golden Crest and Whitmore Reserve. Family unity sells." Eleanor took a breath. "You don't want unity," she said calmly. "You want access." Mark stiffened. "This land," Eleanor went on, "will never again be your leverage." His jaw tightened. "So that's it? You cut us off?" "No," Eleanor said. "I cut off exploitation." Mark stood abruptly. "You'll regret this." Eleanor met his eyes. "I already regretted trusting you," she replied. "I won't regret protecting myself." He left without another word. Veronica sent flowers. Then apologies. Then a long message describing how stress had changed her, how pressure had made her careless, how family should forgive. Eleanor read it once. She did not respond. Forgiveness, she had learned, did not require access. Estate planning is a quiet kind of power. Harold Finch reviewed Eleanor's updated documents carefully. "You've adjusted the inheritance significantly," he noted. "Yes." "You're certain?" Eleanor nodded. The bulk of her estate would fund agricultural scholarships, local women-owned businesses, and the preservation of independent vineyards. Her children would receive enough to live comfortably, but not enough to control, manipulate, or dominate. Legacy, Eleanor believed, was not about blood alone. It was about values. The last dinner was smaller than the first two. No press. No spectacle. Just people who respected the land and the woman who tended it. Clara raised a toast. "To Eleanor Whitmore," she said. "For reminding us that power doesn't always announce itself." Eleanor lifted her glass. "To knowing your worth," she replied. At sunrise the next morning, Eleanor returned once more to the forgotten plot. New vines had been planted, carefully chosen, resilient. She pressed the soil gently around them. Life, she knew now, responded best to patience and boundaries. Months later, a letter arrived. Short. Unsteady handwriting. "I see you now." Eleanor folded it. She placed it in a drawer. Some realizations come too late to undo harm, but not too late to stop it from continuing. Eleanor walked through her vineyard at dusk, the sky painted gold and violet. She felt light. Not because she had won, but because she had reclaimed herself. The rebellion had never been loud. No lawsuits. No public shaming. No dramatic revenge. Just a woman who stopped giving away what was killing her. And grew something better in its place. The end.